Welcome back, and today I'm going to be reading from r/MaliciousCompliance. I've got 5 stories, and yeah, I hope you enjoy. So the first story that I have for today is called Ex-Girlfriend Wants to Cut Off Our Electricity? No problem. I was living with my girlfriend and a roommate, and we split the cost of every bill evenly, even though each bill was in one person's name. Well, that was the idea, but I naively helped my girlfriend pay for her part of the bills, i.e. paid completely for most of them. The rent was in my name, the electricity in my girlfriend's, etc. Well, I eventually got tired of her crap, arguments, smelly gerbils, not doing chores, and we broke up. It was messy, and she took ages to move out, making sure to mooch every penny she could before leaving. When she left, I immediately started a new electricity account in my name. A week later, I got a letter of confirmation in the email, but I also received the electricity bill for the last 3 months my ex was living with us. I opened it without thinking. We couldn't even pay it if we wanted to because the bill was in her name. I shot her a text and I said, "Yo, you got the electricity bill in the mail. It's $120, so come pick up $40 from each of us." And she replied, where's the other $40? We agreed I wouldn't pay bills after I move out, as if she did before. And I replied to her, you were still living here for the time period of the bill. And she said back to me, "This is bullshit. I'm not going to pay a thing. We had an agreement." And I said back to her, "Well, you can come over to get our part, or you can pay it alone." And she said, "The way I see it, you can either bring me the $120 to my place, or have fun in the dark. Lol." I replied, "You got me there." At this point, I realized that she doesn't know I started my own account with the electricity provider. She thought that by refusing to pay, the provider would cut our lights. Good way to mooch another $40 from us, right? Well, that's not quite what happened. After a few weeks later, I received another letter from the electricity company with her name on it. Probably a late payment warning. I sent her a text to tell her, and she responded, "Lol, why are you so desperate to talk to me? You know what you have to do," smiley face. Another letter came in for her. This one was probably late fees. I have to guess because I never opened them. I messaged her and she said, "I thought I told you to never talk to me again." As you wish, ma'am. More letters arrived, but from a new address. I googled the new sender's address and found that they were debt collectors. Scary stuff. It's too bad I couldn't say a word to it. Now, about 2 or 3 months later, I receive a phone call from my ex, and I'm greeted by, "What the F are these people calling my parents' house? I've got all these late fees, bar debt collectors." I told her if she wants our part of the bill, she knows what to do. Smiley face. Realizing that she had no other choice, she caved and came for the money. My roommate and I didn't give her a cent towards the late fees, and I probably looked so fucking smug giving her my money for the last time. So the next story that I have here is called, How About a Good Teacher for a Change? Art teacher turns the tables on students with MC after a 2-month wind-up. So the setting is in an elementary school in 4th grade. Our class have been complaining about our projects in art. The art teacher was going over painting and drawing, and we were getting bored and begging to do something else. "Okay," he says, "we'll do some other stuff." We had 2 months of pottery, carving sculptures out of bars of soap, all sorts of fun stuff. While we'd work on our projects, the teacher always told us stories. Some true, some not, but his favorite kind were ghost stories. Eventually, he figured the stories about the ghosts in the school were the scariest. Pretty soon, he started telling made-up stories about the ghosts that lived in the school, and over the course of the weeks, we shaped our pottery and did our carving. The stories grew to include sightings of ghosts in the school's basement. This basement was really a cellar, perfectly safe, but the floor was usually a bit damp. It was dusty and dingy, etc. We only ever went there for tornado drills. Eventually, he started telling us how he saw the ghost down there, and then how the ghost was even there during the day, all in a way designed to intrigue and perhaps scare 4th graders. Pretty soon, my classmates were demanding to go down to the basement and see the ghost. He'd say, "No, it's too scary." That made people more demanding. Finally, he said, "Do you want to see a ghost in the basement?" And we all replied, "Yeah." And he replied back, "Are you sure?" And we replied confidently, "Yes." And he told us it's pretty scary. And we said to him, let us see. And he said, you'll scream. And we replied, no we won't. And then he said, okay, have it your way, but don't say I didn't warn you. The boys in class were all bragging about how they weren't scared, and the girls were all huddled with their friends. Finally the day arrived. Our teacher said to us, this is going to be scary. It's okay to scream, but don't try to run. I don't want anyone to fall down there, okay? Nervous laughs and nods from around the class. Does anybody want to stay in the classroom instead of going down? No one raised their hands, but there were some apprehensive looks. We all went down to the basement. It was normal. Then the teacher suddenly switched off the lights, and that was when we saw a ghost shimmering in the distance, with its eerily human-like face peering at us. There were screams from both boys and girls. It was loud. Then he switched the light back on, and we heard the teacher laughing, loudly. After some badgering, he pointed to the large white towel hanging from a pipe at the far end of the basement, gently waving in the breeze. Is that where you saw the ghost? We replied, yes. And he said, was it glowing? Yes. Did you know that you can buy paint that glows in the dark? Cue the predictable response from 4th graders and demands for him to show us how he did it and let us try. It didn't dawn on me until yesterday when I told this story to my kids a couple of decades after it happened, that this whole thing was a 2-month wind-up on the teacher's part. Because after we saw the ghost, of course we demanded to know how he did it. We demanded to try the glow-in-the-dark paint ourselves, and did. We got a lesson on using paint you can't see very well, similar to glaze, and we learned about the unusual mediums, including cotton towels. We then went back to other painting type items in art with excitement and demands to the teacher to try all sorts of kinds of paint and painting, which was probably his plan all along. I'm sure he covered everything in his lesson plan that year, just slightly out of order, and with much more enthusiastic kids. We were had and good. So this next story is called Foreman Got His Wish. I used to work in a flaking operation at a chemical plant. Flaking is a process where a chemical is turned into small flakes about the same size and general shape of cornflake cereal. If you've ever had a chocolate-dipped ice cream cone, you have an idea of how the flakes are made. The chemical is heated until it melts. The liquid is pumped into a large tub. A large metal cylinder is suspended over the tub so that one side is in the liquid. Think of it turning that ice cream cone sideways and lowering it just far enough for the ice cream to dip into the chocolate. The cylinder is chilled from the inside, so it's cold like the ice cream. Once it's in the chemical bath, the chemical freezes onto the surface of the cylinder, just like the chocolate, and creates a shell on the ice cream. The cylinder is rotated so a clean surface is being dipped into the chemical while a large blade scrapes solid chemicals off the other side. The scraped off material forms flakes which fall down a chute and into a machine which puts it into bags. How well the process works depends on the temperature of the chemical, the temperature of the cylinder, the air temperature, and the humidity. Get it all working right and the operators can bag up 20 tons of chemical in one 8-hour shift. Our record was 22 tons. Get it wrong and the chemical turns into a vapor. And when that happens, the vapor floats around it inside the machine and then solidifies in places where they shouldn't be, forming stalactites everywhere. And if it goes on too long, the machine binds up and the operators have to shut it down to clean out all of the solid chemical and start all over again. The cleanup process can take several hours and puts production way behind. Finding the right balance is an art, and my team had it down pat. Because we were so good at it, the company sent some engineers down to observe us and record all of the variables. Input temperatures, coolant temperatures, feed rate, rotation speed, etc. Process charts, which were supposed to help the other teams make adjustments so that their production levels would come up. A monitoring process was set up so management could review everything. It required the team lead to record all of the gauge readings every half hour. And during one shift, the foreman came in to check on our process charts. As the team lead, I was responsible for tracking the settings and making adjustments as necessary. At mid-shift, we were on track to match or beat our previous record. The foreman noted that The chemical temperature was lower than spec, but we were having a cool, dry night and everything was running well. So I didn't see the need to make an adjustment. Remember, this process is as much an art as science, and we were the guys they observed to write the specs. Of course, the foreman told me to adjust the chemical temperature up, and when I refused, and that led to a shouting match on the production floor. I finally agreed to make the adjustment if he signed the paperwork. He refused, so on the paperwork I wrote, chemical feed temperature increased per foreman's instructions. He tried to get me to rewrite the entire process sheet so it didn't have that note on it, but I refused and told him I had to get back to work, which I did. Half an hour later, the machine was bound up as I predicted, and we had to shut down and clean everything out. Our production for the night was 16 tons, 2 tons less than the average crew, 4 tons less than our normal output. The shipment that was scheduled for the next day didn't leave on time because we didn't have enough material ready. When the plant manager asked what happened, he could clearly see from the paperwork that the foreman screwed up the production. And that was the last time that the foreman told us how to run our equipment. So this next story that I have is titled, When Retail Customers Feel Entitled to Extra Discounts for No Reason, So You Give It to Them. I worked at a pretty popular department store for years, and I have to say that the customers this store breeds are the worst of the worst. This store is probably 90% of the reason that so many customers feel as entitled as they do. One excuse includes, the cashier had hiccups and it was incredibly annoying. Isn't there anything you can do for me? Was an actual honest-to-God complaint one lady had for me when I was a supervisor. So anyway, I was covering a break up at the registers. I was a supervisor at the time, and I had already given my 2 weeks notice. I was beyond fed up. It was like the spring of my senior year all over again. I had no more fucks left to give. So I'm up at the registers, and this lady, who couldn't have been more than 40, comes up with a huge cart full. Anyone who has worked retail, you know this woman. She's got the hair, she's smacking her gum at me while she talks on the phone, and the entire transaction is delayed because I need to pay her and she starts to ignore me, because apparently I'm the rude one for interrupting her phone call. She proceeds to tell the person on the other end, "Give me a second," and says as if I'm an impatient child testing her last bit of patience, "Yes? Here's your total, ma'am. Do you have any coupons or rewards to use today?" She nodded, and here is when she drops a few clippings on the counter in front of me, ignoring my outstretched hand, and turns her attention back to her phone. As soon as I look at the coupons, I see that none of them are usable. She has one that is $10 off your menswear purchase, or $50 or more. She has all women's clothing. The next coupon expired 2 months ago, and another one doesn't start for another week, etc., etc. So I try again to get her attention. She's just as lovely and accommodating as last time. She rolls her eyes and tells the person on the phone that she will have to call them back and gives me another sharp, "Yes?" I say to her, "Sorry ma'am, this coupon is expired. This one hasn't started, and this one is only for when you purchase $50 worth of menswear. Do you have any other coupons or rewards?" She stares at me like I just called her mother some unsavory name. What? What could I do but shrug helplessly? "You've got to be kidding me. That is the entire reason I came out here today, to use those coupons. I really can't use them? Unbelievable. Some customer service here." All the while she's packing her useless coupons back into her purse and glaring scorch marks into my soul. Remember I said I was done? My patience for Shopzilla here was already at 0, and she just tipped the scales. I was officially in the negatives. I had negative fucks and negative patience left. So when she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself, being so rude to a customer," something in me snapped. I smiled sweetly at her, mustered up a bright and cheery expression that I usually reserve as my waitress face, and said, "I'm so sorry you feel that way, ma'am. But on the bright side, since it's Tuesday, I can still apply your senior's discount, so at least you aren't losing that one, right?" I can't quite describe the expression. I think she was angry, but I think she was more shocked. And in that state of shock, she sputtered out, "I'm not a senior!" I mimicked her shock, trying to appear horrified by my accidental faux pas. Then I immediately said, "Let me take that off there for you," then, and promptly took the senior discount off, bumping her total up another $20. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, ma'am. Oh boy, she was pissed. But like I said, I think she was more shocked. She seemed a little dumbfounded. She paid, took her stuff, and left. I will take that petty moment of satisfaction at her horrified expression to my grave. It was even worth the write-up that I did end up getting after she called the store and gave my manager a piece of her mind. So this last story that I have is called How I Became PepsiMan. PepsiMan! So I go to a relatively smallish high school, like 600 kids. I did nerdy shit. Band, theatre, speech, and I swam too. I was well known and relatively liked. Anyways, in my senior year, I would rock up to school late to first hour English, Pepsi in hand. The teacher starts to notice and gives me detentions for it. I still do it, and this continues for a few weeks until the gas station I bought my Pepsis from was having a sale. Apparently the now ex-manager had ordered way too much Pepsi, like whole pallets worth. It was taking up so much space in his tiny store that the owner put it on sale for $3 for a 24-pack. I would have been a fool not to buy them. I rock up to the school carrying 3 24-packs, whilst avoiding looks from our school cop and hall monitor. I unloaded those babies in my locker. Pepsi time. Pepsi time. I grabbed handfuls of these beautiful blue boys and put them in my backpack. Again, I rock up late to class. Same old, same old. My friend mentions being thirsty. Pepsi time! I grab one out of my backpack and roll it over to him. He looks at me with confusion. I say, drink, my child. People hear me say this. People see the Pepsi. People see how much I have. I give people the Pepsi. I am christened. I am christened as the god of Pepsi. This happens several times over the next 2 weeks, me restocking the Pepsi supply at the end of each week. Eventually, the teacher starts to amp up the detentions to 2 and 3 every time I'm late. Or so she said. I believe it was the cause of the opening cans. One day, she just tells me to go to the assistant principal's office, and the children are left without their Pepsi. They are sad. The assistant principal basically tells me that the cans are distracting to the class, and that I can't bring them in anymore. Sad emote. How will the children get their Pepsi? Such a fool. They'll get their Pepsi anyways. My place of work sells Pepsi for like $1, including employee discount. When I learn of this, I immediately buy about 6 of them. The next day, I leave all of my books at home. No need for them. It's Pepsi time. I rock up to school late again. Pepsi in backpack and solo cups in my hands. The teacher smiles her biggest smile and says, "Good morning." She obviously knows. The teacher smiles her biggest smile and says, "Good morning." She obviously knows about the Pepsi. Fool. I keep eye contact and bring out the 2 liters. Her expression turns. I open one, and the crisp sound of fresh Beppis floods my ears. The other kids cheer. The teacher tries to send me back to the assistant principal's office, but I simply say, "It's not a can." She still calls him down, and I get a 3-day suspension in school for disobeying the rules or whatever. I don't care. My children have been given the water of life. After my suspension ends, I find out from some friends at lunch that they've posted pictures of my face over Pepsi Man's body. I am now Pepsi Man in the eyes of the school, still handing out Pepsi to everyone who asks for it. I am Pepsi Man. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that stuff.